Aloha, I'm Eva Andrade. I'm the president and CEO of Hawaii Family Forum. And on today's episode of Faith and Politics, we're going to look at the three branches of government, most especially the judiciary and how it affects elections. So let's chat about that. Aloha, everybody, and welcome to Faith in Politics. Today, I am surrounded by three gentlemen from the state of Hawaii who are all involved in the judiciary in the state of Hawaii, one way or another. I have Duke Aiona, who is a retired judge in the state here. We have Elwin, who is also a retired judge. And we have Jim Hotchberg, who happens to be an attorney and has probably many days in his life stood before judges. So they're very, very comfortable. The conversation we're going to have today is about the Constitution and the three branches of powers that were set up, but we're going to focus on the judiciary. And so let me just give my guests a chance to introduce themselves a little bit more. Duke, let's start with you.
Aloha, everybody. Duke Aiona, actually James Aiona, nickname is Duke. As Eva already mentioned, I am a retired circuit court judge, also served in family court. Had 8 years in elected office as the lieutenant governor of the state of Hawaii. But I've been a practicing attorney, I guess you could say, since I graduated from law school. So I've never relinquished my license to practice law. I wasn't active in practicing law, but I've always had my license since 1981. So you can do the math as to how long I've been I guess you could say, a licensed practicing attorney. And that's pretty much where I stand right now. I do a little bit of law right now, and of course, spending most of my time with my grandchildren. I'll pass it on to this retired judge, Pastor Elwin.
Thanks, Eva, for having me. It's an honor and pleasure to be around these guys. I mean, they have the brains, so I'll just kind of sit around and add whatever I can. Not really retired in a sense that you work up a number of years. Some of you might know the backstory, where God had grabbed a hold of my heart and I stepped away from that. So in a sense, I'm practicing a different kind of a law. But still involved and still, watch the different issues that arise. And so my brain is kind of like, one time it's on the laws of man, the other time it's the spiritual laws, and sometimes it kind of comes together. And, so I don't have much sleep sometimes at night. But I do know this, I'm a better dancer than Duke is. And so we'll just leave it at that. How's that?
That's funny. So I'm Jim Hotchberg. I've been practicing law a little bit shorter than Duke since '84. I do a lot of religious liberty stuff and other constitutional rights work in the court system, but also do real estate and business stuff like that. And been affiliated with Alliance Defending Freedom since the 1990s.
Now, before we jump into the interview today, what I want to start with is behind each of these men is a wonderful woman. And I really want to thank the wives behind these men, because we know that it always takes a good, strong woman to get behind a good, strong man. And if you've got a good, strong marriage, then we can change Hawaii. Mm-hmm. So shout out to the wives today. So Duke, let's start with you.
Sure.
So the United States Constitution, it built three branches of government, right? You've got the judiciary, you've got the administration, and
executive.
Then executive, right? Executive, yes. And then you have the legislative.
Yes.
So why do you think when the framers set up the Constitution, they did that?
It was unique. It wasn't something that they had I guess you could say, a model for, or they had a template for. So it was something that was created out, and it was the basis for it is just a balance, right? Separation of powers and a balance, so checks and balances for each separate branch of government. So I think if you don't know, I've been in two branches, so I've been blessed to be in two branches of government, the judicial branch, the executive branch, and as you mentioned, the legislative branch. Real basically, legislative branch makes the laws, the judicial branch interprets those laws, and the executive power basically performs the services of government. And that's basically what your branches of government do. And they're vital to just the good administration and effectiveness and efficacy of our entire governmental system. But as we've progressed as a democracy, as we've progressed as a nation, you kind of see the ebb and flow of where the power kind of goes in these three branches of government. And right now, I'd say the judicial branch is consuming a lot of that power in regards to what they are now going to be ruling upon, the laws that Congress has passed, and the on the federal level as far as the administrative policies and directives and executive orders that the president has basically signed and directed in the past few years. And so it all comes back to what? The judicial branch and their interpretation. So that's why it's so important to have justices on our U.S. Supreme Court who will, as in my mind, will interpret the Constitution and the laws of this great land of ours as they need to be interpreted.
And that's important, right? I mean, the judges, as they sit on the Supreme Court, they should have a certain kind of character. So, Elwin, you're a judge. When people are looking at their judges, what kind of character should these judges have?
Well, again, we got to understand, how it was all formed, and I think what the general public misinterprets or are misinformed many times is the co-equal branches of government. So they all stand equal to one another, not where one should have power and assume that power and control over all others. And sometimes you see that, whether it's Congress, whatever they say, against the president or against the justices. And right now they're in an uproar about just the selection process. And so when you look at judges who will then rule upon these conflicts that come up, I would want them to have a balanced look at everything. They should be, the scales of justice is blind, so she's holding that and you see a blindfold on her because she's not looking at, so is it Trump or is it Biden or is it Republican or Democrat? They don't care. And as a judge, when I was sitting there as a judge, I would try to, and I loved it. The part I loved about it was that I could sit in the middle and see the whole thing and then see how this will impact the future. So it wasn't just about the parties itself, but what happens in the future of all this. So a judge that I would look for, a justice that I would look for would be even balanced. They would not be swayed by any kind of financial gain or any kind of popularity, but they would have solid values that I agree with and that they could rule upon a matter.
And again, these are really important things, but the people, they're the butts in the pew, I call them. How do they judge the characteristics of these appointed or even elected or nominated judges? Because we don't know, we don't have the information. Should we trust the president?
I think that's where the process allows itself, where you have your elected officials. So in the case of the U.S. Supreme Court Justice, you have the president who makes the appointment, and the Senate who will then give advice and consent to that. And you put your trust in that person. And so that's why elections, have consequences, we always say. Mm-hmm. It's not just about this particular issue, it's shaping the nation. It's shaping the future, for your kids. I have grandkids too, and they're just the love of your life. You love playing with them. And it concerns me what kind of future they're gonna have. And so the justices who sit on the Supreme Court, or any of the courts, will help to define that future for them.
Yeah, and that's important. And you both alluded to the importance of there being a balance, right, between these three branches of government. Jim, you're an attorney that has fought for, faith-based rights for a long time. Do you see that there's a blurring of the lines between these three branches of government, especially recently?
I would add to what my co-panelist said, is there's a really important distinction between the equal power in the three branches of government, and that is the executive branch and the legislative branch are elected. So we pick them, but in the federal judiciary, they get life appointments. The purpose of that, supposedly, was so that they would not be swayed by the politics of the day, needing to be reappointed by somebody. And that's, I think it was a good idea. I think in the meantime, through law schools across the country over decades, we've actually developed two distinctly mutually exclusive theories of judging and of what the Constitution means. And that's why you have the Federalist Society. Justice Scalia is a really famous kind of poster child for original text interpretation. You read what the words say, and you don't try to make it fit the politics of the day. You're judges, you are appointed for life, the politics aren't supposed to matter. And then you have the competing view, which is this living, breathing Constitution thing, where judges are actually replacing legislative decision-making in cases based on being able to make a determination that changes things. The same-sex marriage case out of the U.S. Supreme Court in 2015 is the kind of most recent big one, where they decided that marriage isn't one man and one woman. It's got to be broader than that because of all these rights. Clearly a legislative analysis and a legislative decision made by a non-elected body. So I think it has blended. And we can talk a little later about the fact that that case was one of the 4 to 5 decisions where, had the justices been different people, it might have come out the other way by 5 to 4.
And you bring up a really good point. And because the three of you have a judicial background, I want you to explain to our viewers this whole idea about the living, breathing Constitution. You hear that a lot, especially now, right? Oh no, the judges should be able to, take the law as it was written in the Constitution and kind of look at today and kind of change it with today. How does each of you feel about that? It's only 27 amendments to our Constitution, so little. Why is that? I'd love for you to share your thoughts on that. Duke.
Well, living, breathing Constitution is a buzzword, basically, the way I look at it, in regards to how you are identified. So you mentioned living, breathing document, you're identified as a liberal, no doubt about it, okay? If you say it's strict interpretation of the as Jim was saying, you're labeled as a conservative. Okay, I like to just kind of put those labels aside and just say, when you interpret the Constitution, you interpret it the way you are trained and the way you are basically educated, and you are mandated and uphold the authority to interpret it as a justice. And that means that you interpret it as written and as precedent would take you. Now, this is where you get into this where it makes a difference as to judicial philosophy, because I can tell you right now, I trust the judicial system. I believe in the judicial system, the American judicial system, and I believe it's probably one of the greatest systems in the world. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying it's probably one of the best in regards to justice and truly getting justice. And so how it evolves the way it does is exactly that. You have these intellects. Just imagine that you have these legal minds, and they're appointed to this most important institution alive. And if they have the right attitude and they have the right approach to it, they're going to approach it as Elwin just said, as an objective jurist, right? As a jurist who will just apply what they need to apply to whatever the facts may be. But unfortunately, they have minds and they have intellects, and they interpret it as such. And in their minds, when they do it, they believe that how they're interpreting it is the way the Constitution was meant to be drafted and the way it was meant to be written. And it comes out maybe just the opposite of what it's supposed to be. But that all goes back to, and you asked Elwin about that character and values, it goes back to your values and principles and how you are as a person. And that's why it's important. So I guess I'm trying to take a real political perspective on this and trying to be nice about it.
Well, yeah.
But maybe Jim won't be, but
I'm glad
I
that you're
will.
doing it. You're all nice. You're all nice.
But let me add this. I was just thinking about it as you were talking through it, because I don't wrestle in my sleep about, is it a living, breathing organism? But when you said that, the image I had in my mind and the metaphor I had in my mind is that something that is alive, something that has life. Now, something that has life has a certain DNA to it that doesn't change. Although time will change and the environment around it will change, there's certain things that happens in that organism that keeps it to be that organism. For example, a mango tree has a DNA as a mango tree. It'll never become a lychee tree. No matter what you do to it, no matter how many leaves you cut off, it'll never become a lychee tree. As a human body, we are human beings. We have a DNA that makes us human beings, that separates us from being a horse or a cow. We will always be human beings. Things will change. Like I'm sure Duke had a lot blacker hair back then. Sorry, I'm picking on you. But there are things about us that change over time. But who Duke is and the values that he stands for and the philosophy of who he is, the makeup of who he is, will stay the same. And I think that's the Constitution. So you'll see something that is alive, yes, but the DNA should never change. That is in place. We'll look at how things happen around us. Okay, things might change here and there, But the spirit of it, the intent of it, the founding fathers' philosophy of it should not change. That's what I see.
Very good.
I would add that there's an intellectual defect in judges who say, well, they didn't have, who knows, electronic devices when they wrote the Constitution, therefore I will interpret what they knew to fit what we know. And I say that it's intellectually defective because that the document itself says how you amend it. So if I was that judge, I would tell those parties, if you want it to be different, go to your legislative body and go through the process that it says right here how to amend it. I'm not amending it. And it's easy to see how correct that is, but somehow it's apparently real easy not to do that.
Two great points right here. I just want to add this. If you read the Constitution, it's not that long. Seriously, everybody should read the Constitution. And maybe you might want to read it at different points in your life, because you might have a different perspective at different points in your life, right?
You mean like the Bible?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. No, but if you read the Constitution, it's a really ingenuous document. I think it's not only visionary, but it's amazingly, how can I put it, contemporary. No matter if it was back then or today, just read it. And Jim's absolutely right. That's why you had, as Elwin had mentioned, 3 co-equal branches of government. They all have a function. And it's happened to me in the courtroom where people have come before me. We don't like this law. We don't like the sentence that, or the punishment that it has for it. Well, neither do I. So change it, Judge. Unfortunately, I can't do that. You have a process. Go do it. Go through that process and change it. And it's, that's what happened with same-sex marriage. Unfortunately, there's many things we can talk about. In Hawaii, we did change the law. We went through the process, okay? So I totally agree with both of these gentlemen in regards to this living, breathing document. But the process, I think that's a good point to bring out. There is a process.
That's really good. So going back to the U.S. Supreme Court, okay, so we've got 9 justices. There's a seat open right now because of the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But explain to people who don't know, Duke, what is the purpose of a Chief Justice? Why is there a Chief Justice?
Well, your Chief Justice is like, it's more than just being the leader on the Supreme Court. There's other administrative things that a Chief Justice does, okay, which we don't need to get into. But the purpose of a Chief Justice is just that. It's because you have 9, right? And there's a reason to have 9, so you don't have any ties, right? You'll always have that tiebreaker. But most importantly, it's because of the number of cases that you have and the direction that those cases have to go, that you need somebody that can administer that. And a Chief Justice, more likely than not, is also somebody who the other justices will take direction from. I don't mean in regards to, okay, the Chief Justice is going to vote this way, so we're all going to vote this way. But the Chief Justice has to lend has to have some kind of order, some kind of system, some kind of timing to these decisions and how it's made. And so the Chief Justice is the one that leads. And so this is why it's so important to have a Chief Justice. Why is it important to have 9? For the simple fact that if session is going to start next week, right?
Actually,
it started October 1st, right? Okay. So,
first Monday. Yes.
Okay, so yeah, first Monday, that's right. So you actually have now, they're in session. The Supreme Court is in session. So anything they decide now will be by 8 justices. There you go. And we've had this situation not too long ago, a couple of years ago.
What happens when
Scalia passed away.
Right.
And so what happens when there's a tie?
Exactly that. This is why you had so many cases.
But what
like
happens? So the case gets there and it's a tie. What happens?
Basically, it's like it's still alive. The case is, you don't have a final decision on it. So it goes back to the previous court, whoever that court was that made that ruling, they got it to the Supreme Court, and it just kind of stays in limbo that way. And this is why you need to have 9 justices so you can get the work done. And because the Supreme Court is supposed to be the final arbiter, right, of all of these issues that come before it. They're the final arbiter. What they say, that's it.
But the deal has to qualify for a case.
Correct.
They don't decide things that are not cases and controversies.
Correct.
So there are some things that never get into court. They'll never get to the Supreme Court.
True. But all I'm saying is that if it does get to them, they're their final arbiter, and you want to have a final decision.
So the role of the Chief Justice then is an important one, and the Chief Justice is appointed by the President.
Nominated.
And then the Senate confirms, right?
Same process.
Yeah, thanks. That's what I meant to say, but I'm Portuguese and my mouth works way faster than my brain sometimes. But Elwin, the very first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was John Jay. And our framers didn't seem to have an issue with this being a man of faith. He was a strong man of faith, actually. And I want to give you a quote that he gave in the Federalist Papers, one of Jim's favorite research items. But I'd like to get your opinion on this quote. He said this. He said, "This country and this people seem to have been made for each other. And it appears as if it was the design of Providence that an inheritance so proper and convenient for a band of brethren, united to each other by the strongest ties, should never be split into a number of unsocial, jealous, and alien sovereignties." And that was the Federalist number 2. Do you think in a way that's kind of prophetic to what's happening today?
Well, it's prophetic, but and it was also very much influenced by how the country got started to begin with. Solid biblical background. God is at the center of everything. And not just in speeches and in public press and communication. I mean, how townships were formed. The church was always a center of everything that happened in that township. They formed the church, and then civilization and society would form around that. So anything important, anything that needs to be decided, happened in the church. In fact, I'm just doing we're starting this series in our church called One Nation Under God and Indivisible, but yet we stand so divided today. And so I'm studying this right now. And a U.S. Capitol, by a bipartisan agreement, allowed the nation's capital to be used as a church from the 1800s all the way through the Civil War. And some of the congressmen were writing in some of their diary entries saying that this place is so full of people that we have to put up more chairs in the Senate chambers. And then we have to put up more chairs in the Supreme Court chambers. And it's amazing. First woman spoke in the nation's capital when the 13th Amendment was passed, abolishing slavery. The first black preacher preached in the nation's capital. I mean, that's how ingrained God was in the formation of our nation. And so to hear our Chief Justice say that, the very first Chief Justice say that, is not surprising. You know, it's all about being united together under a covering, under a canopy of the Lordship of Jesus Christ. And therefore, again, going back to the DNA, the living and breathing document, that's the DNA of who we are, and that shouldn't change.
And it's that blood, sweat, and tears and prayers that built this nation. That's what brought us together in unity. And even there were people in the early days of our country that were not Christians, but they understood that the foundations on which this country was built was based on some pretty strong foundations, the unshakable scriptural foundations.
But you know, you're right, because if you travel across the country in all these little towns and stuff, the center of the town is where the church is. And I want to have you think, what is the center of Honolulu right now? What intersection is the center of Honolulu? It's
King
Bishop,
Street and
King.
Yeah.
What's on the four corners of that intersection today in Honolulu? Bank, 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 bank. That's how we've changed.
Wow, that's important. Now I'm going to be driving over there, and thanks, Jim, that you gave me a visual for that.
Right. Yeah.
So we're going to be going to a break shortly, but Jim, I want to talk about the Federalist Papers, because I know you love the Federalist Papers.
I like the Anti-Federalist Papers too.
Yes, I mean, you're really a good historical factor. So John Jay was part of the writers for the Federalist Papers because they were fighting for the Constitution to be passed in this. So there was some lobbying that had to happen at that time just to get the Constitution passed. You want to talk a little bit and share your thoughts on the Federalist Papers and the fight to get this country united under the Constitution?
And we've talked many, many times, so I think I know why you're asking me that. When they were proposing the U.S. Constitution and it had to be adopted by the colonies, it had to be adopted by the legislatures of the colonies and the people of the colonies. And they were farmers. And they didn't have TV. There was no internet, no radio. You had to talk person to person, town hall meetings. They used these writings to argue James Madison's perspective against Thomas Jefferson's perspective. And the farmers could read and understand the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist Papers. I would urge you to Google text of Federalist Papers, text of Anti-Federalist Papers. There's a lot of them, and they're topical and they're kind of short, but just read a few. Just kind of flip through, read some, and realize how the literacy has gone down in the last several hundred years. The farmers who farmed didn't go to school enough except to learn how to read through the Bible, could read these documents, could understand the government that was being formed, and they approved it.
That's right.
It's really good. It's so funny. I'm still picturing that street that you talked about, and I'm thinking, you said it was King and Bishop? So even when they built our roads, they didn't separate church and state. That's right there for us to. Okay, so as we start getting ready for the break, what I want to jump into when we come back from the break, so I want your juices to start thinking about this. Some of the conversations we've been hearing on the TV is about expanding the Supreme Court. So I'd like to, when we come back from break, for you guys to talk a little bit about that. So when we come back, make sure you come back right away, because we've got some good information coming up for you. We'll be right back.
We have a mission here at Kalo TV. We continue to be the only local Christ-centered media outlet in Hawaii. God has planted this station to nourish believers and to harvest souls for eternity. It's a calling we hold dear, and today we need your help. Partner with us as we continue to create original local programs.
We're so very grateful for that whole journey.
Walking down to our story room.
Oh my God.
Showcase solid biblical teaching.
We reach more people in one day with the broadcast of the gospel.
It's music to God's ears.
Improve our infrastructure and influence social media. Are you willing to labor with us for Hawaii, for your ohana, for the next generation? Go to kalotv.com and partner with us today.
Kalo TV is proud to partner with Family Forum, keeping you informed on legislative issues affecting families in Hawaii today.
Aloha, I'm Eva Andrade. I'm the president of Hawaii Family Forum, and we've been serving Hawaii's faith-based community since 1998. What we do is we provide research and education to the faith-based community to help them understand what's happening at the state capitol and what's happening on the issues that affect the families here in Hawaii. If you would like more information, please visit us on the web. But in the meantime, know that Micah 6:8 says that the Lord requires of us to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And we can help you do that, not only to raise your voice the way that the Lord calls us to raise our voice, but to understand the issues on a scriptural basis. And we'll tell you how you can learn more about what's affecting Hawaii's families. Mahalo.
And then below we have a very special guest. We've got Barry McGuire. Barry, thanks for joining us.
I finally made it. I finally made it to your show. I've arrived. Okay, Lord, you can take me now.
Your real passion is a TV program that you do called Ignite Your Life, which, by the way, it's also a radio program, and it's on over 800 Christian radio stations in 47 states.
And it's a new TV program here on Kalo in Hawaii.
So in your program, as people are watching this, they're going to see you driving these incredible cars and having these great conversations. Classic car guy or exotic car guy? What best describes you?
We're talking about the Lord. You want to know what kind of car I like for crying out loud?
Don't worry, we're going with it.
I wasn't expecting such a deep theological thought today.
Yeah, well.
Welcome back. We're going to continue the discussion about the Constitution, the framers, and the Judiciary and the Supreme Court. So, Duke, jumping right in there, I want to go back so that our viewers really understand what the role of the president is in the nomination of a Supreme Court justice.
It's pretty clear. Again, I mentioned earlier, read the Constitution. I believe it's in Article 2, if I'm not mistaken, which gives the president the plenary power to appoint or nominate, I should say, the justices of the federal system, which means you have district court judges, appellate court judges, and of course the Supreme Court justices. That's his plenary power. There's no question about that. Congress then has the plenary power for what they call, as somebody mentioned, advise and consent. In other words, the nomination is sent to the Senate, and the Senate will then advise and consent. They don't have to consent to that nominee, and if they don't consent to that nominee cannot be appointed to whatever the bench may, whatever the appointment may be, whether it's district court, appellate court, or justice. And that's happened in the past, no doubt about it. And that's, again, goes back to our checks and balances, co-equal branches of government, right? So it's not all in one person's, power to just appoint. Now, many of the states have followed this, and this is why I want to make this very perfectly clear. It's a power, and it's a reason why you vote for who you vote for. Let's just put that right out on the table. There's no question about it. This is why you vote for who you vote for. And you'll hear many presidents, you'll hear many governors say, as a result of this election, I will have an opportunity to appoint somebody to either the state Supreme Court, if it's a governor, or if it's the president, to the Supreme Court. And does it make a difference? Absolutely.
Now, do presidents, or in the state of Hawaii, the governor goes through the same process, do they normally put their lists out for people to see? Is this a normal process, or is this something different that we're seeing this year?
This is actually, that's not a normal thing for you to put a list out as to who would be. But because this president is a lot different from for many reasons, right? And so I believe it's because of the times that he's facing, or the opposition that he's facing right now, and the challenges that he's facing right now, that he's doing what he's doing. You never saw Barack Obama do that. I don't believe he did that, at least prior to the appointment the nomination being made. I think you might have heard rumors about it, because that's just part of the process, right? You're going to hear rumors because it is the White House that basically starts that process going when there's a vacancy, right? And it doesn't matter, again, what level you're talking about. But it makes a difference. This is what governors run on. This is what presidents run on. And so I don't understand why the Democrats are going crazy over this the unfortunate passing of our justice, right? And now the vacancy of it.
Well, to be fair, what they're saying, right, is that when the Republicans had power, when this happened before, they did not allow
Absolutely,
the judge.
But that's not in fairness. That's just the process.
Yeah,
that's
they didn't want Garland, so they didn't have hearings.
Right, so that's...
And if there was a president that they liked his suggestion, they could have taken it. They didn't like the suggestion.
Right. So I guess just in the spirit of fairness, what they're saying is, look, you guys didn't want it to happen then, but you want it to happen now. So where's the consistency?
Well, no, I disagree, because if there was a hearing with Garland, he wouldn't have got appointed. The Republicans were in power at that point in time. They had the majority. Garland wasn't going to get the votes anyway. They just wanted to make it a political specter at that point in time, put the pressure on the Republicans, thinking that was going to sway the election in some way, which it didn't. And as a result of that, President Trump got elected, knowing that was a huge issue.
For me, it was.
Yeah, well, for many people,
well,
it
and
was.
it should be for
many.
voters, and that's
Absolutely.
the important message that we want to get out, to our constituents, people watching, is that your vote matters. Every vote matters, and we want people to participate. But let's talk about some of the conversations that are taking place right now, right? So,
but before you go into that, there's one thing that's different between the state judiciary selection process and the federal, and that is our legislature created what's called the Judicial Selection Commission. So these guys that meet in a secret room and come up with 5 names to give to the governor to pick from, it's kind of gives political cover to the elected guys, because, hey, I only had these 5 names to pick from. I didn't pick, I would have picked somebody else. So that is different.
That is different, that's true. But you also, if you're going to go that way, I'm going to also got to mention this. There are a lot of states in which don't have that kind of selection process, and they are actually elected.
Correct.
They are, can you believe, I'm definitely, I don't know where Elwin stands on this, but I am definitely not an advocate, an opponent of an elected judicial appointee, a judicial judge. Why? Think about it. If I'm going to be running for the Chief Justice of the state of Hawaii, I'm going to be running for that. I got to raise money. I'm going to do, if I'm already on the bench, do you think it'll affect the way I rule on certain issues?
You just scared half of our viewers to death by saying raise money. I think that's why a lot of people don't run for office here in the state.
But
I mean, it really does come to that.
You're going to get phone calls. People will call you and say, "Hey, my friend is, has this case," and that's where the independence of a judiciary is so critical. That and so you don't hear judges talk about a particular case. In fact, Judicial Code of Conduct prohibits judges from discussing a case. And so the public will go crazy about all kinds of different theories of this and that, and the judge is not saying anything. We can't say anything in order to preserve the integrity of the independence of that branch of government.
And I think that's important too for our viewers to understand, that our Constitution does give Congress the right to say how many Supreme Court seats there are. And I'm just curious, Elwin, and Duke, I know you got a thought, so we'll let you get it in, but what is your thoughts on that? So Trump has an appointment, say that this appointment is accepted by the Senate and becomes a seat, and now we've got some members in Congress saying, well, we'll just increase the number of seats. Is that possible? What's your thoughts on it, and what would be the process?
Well, I think, first of all, the process is an amendment, constitutional amendment, and that requires more than just Congress saying we're going to change it.
So they wouldn't be able to just do it?
I don't think the Constitution states the number of justices.
No, it doesn't.
No, it does not. And they've changed it over the years because it's a legislative act. So if the American people give the majority to the Senate and the president as Democrats, they can, by legislation, the Constitution doesn't say how many, it just says there shall be a Supreme Court. And so they can say, okay, then we want to have 15, and while we're in control with these new seats, we're going to appoint them all, and oh, look at that, we got the majority now.
Yeah. So I think, but I think that my thoughts behind that is, when I hear comments like that from the congressional members saying, we want to pack the court, so to speak, it's a reflection of the times that we're living in right now, which is, if I don't get my way, I'm going to do something to get my way.
And what would you do to your child or your grandchild if they threw a fit in front of you and said, well, then we'll just do it this different way, and threw a hissy fit?
And that's the problem with, I think, the society we're living in right now, which is the here and now. We're so fixed on what is the fix for the here and now, and we're not forward thinking, we're not broad-based thinking, we're not thinking about what. And this is where the Constitution, the framers of the Constitution were really good at. They were seeing things, and maybe they didn't even know it, but they were looking at things, how it's going to impact the country in the future. And that's how the whole Constitution was formed.
But if your political philosophy is that judges should judge based on this living, breathing thing to bring in new things that can't be done politically, then you want to pack the court, because that's how you're going to get the things you can't do politically. And with this appointment of Judge Barrett, if she gets confirmed, Justice Roberts, I read an interesting thing about, and we could talk about later, but 6'3" is way better than 5'4", and she's like not even 50 years old, so she's going to be there a really, really long time. If you want to enforce your political will through the judiciary, because you can't get it at the ballot box, you will pack the court, because you're thinking long-time future. It's not all immediate.
But then it flips, yeah? So if you're a Democrat and you're packing the court now, and that whole thing flips, and now it's more Republican.
Yeah, when they die slowly over the terms.
Well, theoretically, right?
But Elwin's right. I mean, we're in a situation right now of picking a Supreme Court justice by just a majority, without the, I guess you could say, the tool of the filibuster, as a result of the Democrats.
Correct.
The Democrats are the ones that basically changed that law, albeit it was for lower courts, but it was the same intent. They couldn't get their guys in. Republicans would filibuster, right? They couldn't get their guys in. So they changed the rule, right? And so now, and people told them that. Change this law now, and it's going to come back and bite you. And sure enough, it comes back and bite. And so now they're crying. So, Eva, it's just going around and around. So anyway, packing the court. My question would be this. What is the benefit of expanding 9 to 15, or whatever you want, 17, 20, whatever it might be? What is the benefit? Why would you do that? And I think you can only come back to what Jim said. And that's not a very good reason.
It's not a good reason.
That's not a very good. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. That's not a good reason. That is not a solid reason now. So I guess the corollary question to that is, well, why? What's the benefit of where we're at right now? Why is 9 better than 15? And I think there's more reasons you could give for that as to why there's more of a benefit than it would be to expanding it. And 9 is much more manageable than 15. Simple. What just so happens in a given year, you got 15 justices and 6 either retire or pass away. Whoa. Now what? Now if you're in the political party in the majority, you're going, yeah. But if you're not, you're going, oh. Yeah. And guess what? I think it would be incumbent. Something like that would happen to the party that made that change, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican.
And then where does it end, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're packing out with 15, so you're not getting your way. So, well, let's go to 21.
Right.
And
pretty soon it's just another circuit court of appeals.
But I think that's what's happening. When you listen to the conversations, regardless of what side of the political spectrum people are, they're saying, I want X on the court because of this issue, right? The pro-life people are saying, we want it to be,
elections have consequences. That's why you vote for the president, the executive, who you believe will make that appointment. I should have put more emphasis on that when I told you that's, when Obama couldn't get his appointment, that's why they wanted to make it an election issue. It was an election issue, and guess who got elected?
Okay, so we want to make sure people understand process, though. So let's go back to Elwin. So say they do expand it or they want to do it. What is the process? It's not going to happen right after Inauguration Day.
Well, I'm going to defer to Jim because I thought it was an amendment that takes place. But if it's not, then you're looking at who makes up the House, who makes up the Congress, and right now
somebody's got to
Democrats
sign
rule.
that into law.
Yeah.
So Jim, what would the process be then? So let's say Biden is elected and he's sworn in on Inauguration Day, and let's just go and say that the Democrats also take over the Senate. So now
and they keep the House.
And they keep the House. So now it's a full democratically controlled.
So it's exactly the same thing as a legislative act that happens in Honolulu. One of the houses will propose a bill, and it will say purpose of the bill is to help us keep our political stuff going for the rest of our lives. You won't say that, but that's what it means. Expanding the court number of justices to 15, and it'll go through the House and flip over to the Senate. It'll go through the Senate. It'll go to the president. He'll sign it. How long does that take? They do it all the time in 3 months here. So it's quick. And then they have nominations from President Biden, and Chuck Schumer's Senate approves them all. Boom, 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 boom. It doesn't take a long time.
Yeah, you hit the perfect note on this. And I think this is why we want our audience to understand this. This is why you need to have balance. This is why you need to have balance in the legislature, most importantly. People always forget, what are you going to do when you're governor of the state of Hawaii? Well, I tell you what, I can't do much, maybe from a legislative side, because that's not my function. My function is really about policies and just basically administering the services that we have in this state. But if you want to have laws that you believe are the correct laws, then make sure we have a balanced legislature, because that's exactly what's going to happen. And that's how it's been in this state for the last 40 years.
But I got to say, when you were Lieutenant Governor and Governor Lingle was running the state, some of the best floor debates I've seen took place here
because we
had about 19, I think, Republicans in the House at the time. But it was really good.
But here's the balance on that. Just say the makeup wasn't as it was, and it was more how it is today. This bill still has to go through the governor. And the governor has probably the biggest bully pulpit than the legislators, right? And people at that point in time, once you're elected, believe it or not, it's just kind of crazy. But when you're elected, people kind of have blinders on as to whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. They want to hear what you have to say. What's your logic behind it? What's your basis for it? Why are you opposed to it? And we had a governor that was very articulate. And it was very difficult for them to pull a political move on her without being able to articulate it. And that's what was happening. That's what happens. They can pass a bill right now and not have to articulate anything on it. And they have a governor now who's along with them, who's just going to sign it in. It's not going to push back on it. But you have a governor that's now going to be a check and balance on it and say, hey, this is what's wrong with it, my friends, and this is why we can't pass it. Very difficult to pass that. So please, this is one of the reasons why we have to have balance in government. Plain and simple.
I would love for you, Pastor Elwin, to talk about this one point that Jim had alluded to earlier, because I think people, they really think about this, and it freaks them out a little bit, that a Supreme Court judge is appointed for life. And I think that scares people. How do you feel about that?
I think it's great if it's somebody that agrees with my philosophy.
And they live a long time.
Oh man! But seriously, that's the importance of the election and the reason why people need to research things well. I think you asked earlier, is it normal to show a list of who are potential candidates? I think what Trump is trying to do is because he's not a politician, he's not known as a politician. He's trying to really show the people that these are my intentions. And this is what I've done in the past, and the next opening comes up, this is who I'm choosing from. As opposed to Biden, who's still not sure where he's coming from on this stuff. I mean, what's the big deal about showing your list? Because he's not sure, who's running that campaign and where he's going with it.
And the list that was put out by President Trump was put out a while ago. I mean,
It was before the first election.
Yeah, so he was letting the populace know, even for those that don't support him, look, these are the type of people.
And they're lifetime appointments, not just Supreme Court justice, right? Your Court of Appeals, right? Your district court too, right? District court,
the magistrates,
every federal level.
And let's talk about that for a second, Jim. The Ninth Circuit. Let's talk about them. Didn't they have a little bit of a flip recently?
Well, President Trump has nominated and gotten confirmed so many circuit court judges that our infamous Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which was so liberal, some people called it Ninth Circus Court of Appeals, it's actually got a majority of conservatives now, which is really interesting. You don't get that whole court on a case, you get 3 of them. And I don't know how they pick the 3 that you get. Sometimes you get 3 people that really don't like your position, and sometimes you get 1 that does and 1 that doesn't, and 1 seems neutral. There's a case currently pending there out of the Big Island where a guy sued under the Second Amendment because he was denied a concealed carry permit on the Big Island. It went to the Ninth Circuit, and the 3 judges that got picked, they decided, well, you do have a right in the county of Hawaii, in the state of Hawaii, to carry a weapon outside, but we don't like concealed carry, so we're going to say open carry. And that case is sitting there right now trying to figure out en banc with all of the 30 or however many there are Ninth Circuit judges to hear it again and decide, do they want the Wild West in Kona in or not? So with the circuit courts, there's a mix of people. They've been there for years, so that you've got different presidents that put different people in. They got different philosophies. You get 3, and then you either ask for the whole group to hear your case, or you can try to appeal to the Supreme Court.
But the point again I want to emphasize too, though, however a Supreme Court may rule, the legislature can always trump that also. They can always trump it. They can do it either by a constitutional amendment, or they can do it by a law.
You bring up a good point, because currently with the lockdown, that's kind of what happened with some of the court cases, right? Is that the legislature could have come into session and they could have fixed this whole 60-day rule, right? They could have done it. Jim, you want to talk about that? Because that shows
that's a whole show in itself.
It is. Well, we've done.
I'm serious. I'd rather talk about 5-4 decisions on the Supreme Court.
Well, but that's the point. The point is having, the balance. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Because I don't want to.
Because you can.
So the law that gives the governor power to do all this crazy shutdown, don't wear a mask, whatever, is Chapter 127A, which has a provision in Section 14D that says on the 60th day after the proclamation of the state of emergency, the state of emergency automatically terminates unless the governor, by a separate proclamation, had already terminated it earlier. So the language of the statute is, governor, mayors, you got 60 days to do our legislative work, because basically it's a delegation of legislative lawmaking to the executive branch, and it ends on the 60th day. And I litigated that case in Kona, and the judge said, yeah, that's what it says, Mr. Hotchberg, but you know what? I like the way the governor reads it better. He can do whatever he wants.
So this again goes to how important it is that the right people are being elected and appointed, and nominated and then appointed, right? So to keep the conversation flowing. So let's go back to Amy Coney Barrett, right? She's President Trump's nominee right now. She's Catholic, and she's been under a lot of pressure in the media. Duke, because you too know what that's like to be attacked because of your faith, do you think that that's an on-subject or an off-subject thing for somebody?
Well, both of us. I mean,
yeah,
we
well,
both
for
ran
Elwin
at the same
too.
time, and of course he's a pastor, and so of course not. There's and I think it's discriminatory if you said that was a basis for appointing a justice. It doesn't matter, and not just a supreme, any judge. I think it's discriminatory. Look, I think it was Feinstein that originated this.
The dogma lives.
The dogma, yes, the dogma. Now we have a representative here. I won't mention her name. Starts with Maisie, but anyway, she's taking on that mantra now about her dogma and how troubling that's going to be. Well, I hate to break the news to both of them, but everybody has dogma. Everybody, even an atheist has dogma. And so if I go by that standard, Eva, nobody can get appointed. Nobody can get elected also, because we all have dogmas.
Well, just think with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she was Jewish. What if this attacks had been against her back in, was it 1983 when she was appointed? You know, if those conversations happened then, it wouldn't have passed.
Well, like I said,
muster.
every representative, every justice, I believe, everybody has a dogma. Okay, it just so happens you call it, you say it's religious, it's Christian, it's Catholic. Somehow that makes it worse. We don't have to get into that, but you know, obviously, so my response to that is absolutely not. That should not even be a part of it, but yet they're going to waste most of their time on something like that. Look, on the last appointment they had, Justice Kavanaugh, I was doing a little bit of research, and apparently the average amount of questions for the last few nominees were like about 200 to 300. For him, they had 1,200 questions, and a majority of those questions, as Jim had mentioned when we were talking about this previously, were repetitive, but they were all about this allegation of sexual assault. All on that one subject. How many questions did you hear about his competency to be a jurist, to be fair and objective, right? And how he's going to apply the law to the case. How many questions did we hear about that? Everything was on this.
Well, it's interesting because Judge Barrett has already been vetted. She's already been vetted. She's already gone through the process. So, Elwin, do you want to share a little bit about your thoughts on that?
Well, you want someone with morals or someone that's immoral, basically, right? I mean, if you don't have that faith belief or something that has guided your life and your decisions, what does that make you? Is that who you want on the bench? Is that who you want for a lifetime?
How do you think she came across, though, in that first round of hearings? Just as a judge, you know, just judge to judge.
I think it's an excellent candidate. You know, how she expresses herself. She's very balanced. She's not like overly emotional. I could see somebody getting really upset. You know, how dare you talk about that with me? And
Kavanaugh got very upset. He almost cried.
Well, after a while, I think that was just. I think all of us would have got. He got beaten down. A bunch.
Well, you're right.
So, what would your advice to Judge Barrett be if you could sit her down and give her some advice?
I actually don't have to give her any advice, because when she was doing her circuit court appointment hearings, she pointed out to the legislators that the Constitution actually says, and it's not an amendment, this is the original text, 1789, there shall be no religious test for the holding of any public office or trust in the United States of America. So they can't say it's because she's Catholic. That's a religious test. They have to say it's because of dogma, and somehow that's not a religious test. I don't think so, but that's the game. That's the game. And the real question, to tell you the truth, I think, is because abortion is a sacrament to the Democratic Party. And they don't want to lose their sacrament. It's sad, but I think it's true.
Well, we're running out of time as we normally do on these shows. So what I'd like to do is maybe give each of you an opportunity to talk to the viewers that may not know who they're going to vote for. I think that most people know what way they're going to go, but there are some that are still saying they're either going to leave it blank or they're just not going to participate. So I want you to reach those guys.
Well, first of all, don't leave your ballot blank. If you leave your ballot blank, you're not participating and taking advantage of the greatest privilege and opportunity that you have as an American citizen, which is the privilege to vote. The right to vote, I should say, not the privilege, it's the right to vote. And so you need to vote. Again, as I mentioned the last time I was on this program, I said, you know, we need to understand that when we look to a candidate, first and foremost, there's not going to be a perfect candidate. Secondly, you have to be, your basis for whoever your vote is going to be for has to be upon principles and values. What are your principles? What are your values? And I think we gave you a ton of reasons why today in regards to principles and values, how you should vote.
Well, coming from the pastoral standpoint, and I think I talked about this on a previous program, you got to know where you stand on your faith. You have to know what you believe in, your internal compass. What is that? See, too many times, I think we're moving into a world today where politics is informing our faith versus our faith informing the political issues that we stand for. For example, if I believe that, say abortion, let's just take abortion, that it's okay to have abortion because it gets in the way of a woman's professional career, whatever. Therefore, then my faith will be this. No, that's not right. What is your foundational faith beliefs in that? And then you don't look at charisma, don't look at who's more handsome, look at who agrees with the values you believe in. And do your research. There's so many different references that you can go to find out about issues and where these candidates stand on that.
And I would say that Hawaii is a really special place, different from everywhere else. And we actually didn't have one. We had two perfect candidates. We did. But we didn't vote our values. We got to vote our values. And I've been saying that with you for 20 years. Seriously, quit voting for who's related to you. Quit voting for who you went to school with. Stop.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Yep.
It is. It's really important that each of us take our time to research the candidates, to pray about it. But we need to be the change in this state. I think that we should not rise to the anger and the frustration and the name calling and all of that stuff that's happening across the nation right now, because we represent Jesus in all that we do. And all we need to do is take a moment in prayer, take a moment to research the candidates. And if we really don't know who to vote for, then don't leave it blank. Don't just toss it aside. Take a moment, step away, have a cup of coffee, talk to friends and neighbors. But we need to be the change. So as we leave this episode today, I want you to take that to heart. Take a moment in prayer. Sit before the foot of the throne and say, Lord, I want to be the change in this great state of Hawaii. Mother Mary Ann had a statement, Naka naka, ku'uvale aku no I ka uhane. The people freely give up their souls and die. And these were people that went to Molokai. They were sent there. They were forgotten. Well, you're not forgotten. The Lord carved you in the palm of his hand. You have a purpose. You have a voice for Jesus, for faith, family, and freedom. Mahalo, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.